The regular season's finally over. Phew. And boy, was it a long one. In this video, I want to look back at all 32 teams and see how accurately I predicted their season and grade myself on how I did. Spoiler alert, not that great. But to see how accurately I predicted every team's outcome, I have to set some rules. If the prediction is green, I got the exact record or was within 1 game. If it's yellow, I missed by 2 or 3 games. And if it's red, I missed by 4 games or more. Every win or loss over my prediction will be added as a negative, and all those subtractions will be added to the division total, and all those division totals will be added up to see my total accuracy for the season. My standings will be green if I got the exact position, yellow if I was off by 1, and red if I was off by more than 2. But with all that said, let's get into my review. Blissful ignorance really caught me on this prediction. I thought Rodgers would bring the Jets out of their quarterback misery the past 10 years. But in reality, Rodgers really didn't change much. The offensive line was battered. Defense was still good though. But the Jets fell way short of Super Bowl expectations. And as a Jets fan, that's why I gotta put this one first. Arguably my favorite outcome of this season, I had the Patriots not doing very well, but they thankfully did so much worse than I expected. Bill Belichick likely to be fired, finishing as the 3rd overall pick. And all I can say is goodbye and good riddance to that dominant Patriots dynasty. The Dolphins were actually the team I thought were going to win the division, but it turns out that Tua is not made for the dim lights of Miami. But overall, this team was the 2nd best offense in the NFL, and the defense was it was alright, but injuries really hurt them down the stretch. But I would not be shocked if they were a 1st round exit. I was dead on with the Buffalo Bills, even with their exact record. I thought that they would struggle heavily in the beginning of the season. They were 6-6 at one point, and then I had them climbing back up at the end of the season, finishing 11-6, which was absolutely correct. I just didn't expect them to be better than the Jets or the Dolphins, which I thought had humongous off seasons. But they did take advantage of that situation, so I'll give the Bills their props. I had 3 teams in the AFC East going to the playoffs. Only 2 actually went, with the Bills winning the division, the Dolphins coming in 2nd, Jets in 3rd, and the Patriots in 4th. With the Jets being the worst of my predictions, I have the AFC East as 9 games off of the actual. I think my worst division was the AFC North. Starting with the Steelers, I'm just so ignorant to think that Mike Tomlin is going to take this terrible roster to the playoffs like he does almost every year. Steelers had a great defense, but a really bad offense. However, with a really weak strength of schedule and taking advantage of teams with injured quarterbacks, they were able to skate by with a 10-7 record. So yeah, good for you guys. I'm not the only one in this camp, but I think that the Browns season was saved due to Deshaun Watson's injury. Their offense performed way worse with him than without him. Joe Schwartz did an incredible job with the defense. Myles Garrett was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. But with Deshaun Watson, the Browns played as expected. They would have ended up with an 8 or 9 win season, but with getting Joe Flacco, who should be the Comeback Player of the Year, they're able to make the playoffs and be the 5th seed. I don't even think with Joe Burrow they would have reached the 13-4 mark. They already had 4 losses in the first 6 weeks. But Joe Burrow got hurt, and Browning played well enough in a backup role for them to go 9-8. But it was a long shot for them to make the playoffs, so another bad prediction for me. The Baltimore Ravens were just so good this year. They were the best team in the NFL. To a top 3 offense and the best defense in the NFL. The Ravens really cruised this season, destroying pretty much every good team they faced, as well as Lamar Jackson having an MVP caliber season, and the rushing attack being pretty much the best in the NFL. Props to the coaching as well. Mike McDonald will get a head coaching job this offseason, and Todd Monken was a great addition at offensive coordinator. The AFC North was my worst AFC division and my 2nd worst overall. I was off by a total of 13 games, didn't pick the correct division winner, and the Steelers and Browns had winning records. I'll look to clean this up next year. If Antonio Pierce wasn't named the head coach, the Raiders almost certainly would have been 5-12. But after he took over, the Raiders looked like a completely different team, getting better on offense, but most importantly, getting much better on defense. Even had a great Chiefs upset in Week 16. My only advice to the Raiders is to bring Antonio Pierce back. The Broncos were pretty much on par with what I thought their season was going to be. An improvement from what they were with Nathaniel Hackett, but not enough to make the playoffs. That 1 win difference was a meaningless win over the Chargers. The Broncos are pretty much set in getting rid of Russell Wilson, and I'm probably expecting a regression from them. They really just don't have the talent to compete with the rest of the AFC. In my prediction video for the Chargers, I said that they would take a lot of regression. I didn't believe in Brandon Staley, the defense, but I really didn't expect them to take this sharp of a jump. Justin Herbert got hurt too, as well as Keenan Allen to end the season. Brandon Staley was justly fired, but I think with a new, good offensive coach, I think they could jump right back. The Chiefs didn't have nearly as good as a season as I thought. The wide receiver problem really plagued them. The Chiefs led the league in drops. Patrick Mahomes probably had his worst year as a professional. And I think the offensive woes can be attributed to Eric Bieniemy leaving this offseason. The Commanders' offense looked way better than the Chiefs, and they desperately need to address the wide receiver problem in the offseason. But they won in a lackluster division anyways, so it's whatever. The AFC West was another bad division, but I don't really think so. I was really only off on win total. Two teams fired their head coach, one got better, one got a lot worse from it. But I think this division as a whole was a lot worse than people expected. Truly a phenomenal season. Every member of the Texans staff deserves all of their flowers. DeMeco Ryan is my coach of the year, along with CJ Stroud as my rookie of the year. My prediction was that they caught fire late in the season, and Stroud had more of a developing curve, but it really didn't turn out like that. Stroud immediately was an elite quarterback. Their defense got a whole lot better, and they even ended up winning the division. But I'll happily take my L on this prediction. The Colts are another team where coaching and offensive improvement drastically improved the record. Just like the Texans, the Colts also hit on their head coach with Shane Steichen. The Eagles look so much worse on offense without him, and the Colts were vastly improved on offense, especially within the rushing game. If they would have beat the Colts, they would have won the division, which just proves how close they are to making the playoffs. Good on them as well. The Tennessee Titans were on par, almost exactly what I thought. I didn't think Ryan Tannehill was going to make it through the whole season. I thought they were going to be competitive, but not competitive enough to win the division. And they had a few good games, but a lot of the time they were just a mediocre offense, with a defense that's been slowly regressing. This is likely Derrick Henry's last year in a Titans uniform, and the franchise is going to move with Will Levis at quarterback. What a pitiful end to their season. The Jaguars were at 1.83 and it looked like they were going to hit dead on 11-6. But with an inefficient running game, Trevor Lawrence struggling, and a regressed secondary, the Jaguars lost 5 of their last 6 games. And with the loss of the Titans in their final game, they blew the division. I don't expect the Jaguars to make major changes, whether that's personnel, coaching, or scheme, and I think 2024 is going to be a regression year for them. With 3 humongous surprises in the AFC South, I ended up having minus 12 or 12 games off. But I don't think anybody expected the Colts or the Texans to be within the division lead. And who expected the Jaguars to fall from grace with a 3-game division lead in the last 6 games? And looking at the AFC standings, I really did have a bad year, only picking 1 out of 4 division winners and was correct on 4 out of 7 playoff teams, as well as only having 1 exactly correct record, and I didn't have 1 correct standing placement either. But with that said, let's move on to the NFC. The Commanders were a team that I expected to once again be a top 7-ish pick, but they ended up as the 2nd overall pick. They went 4-13, and I expected Ron Rivera to be fired after the offseason. I think he will be. Eric Bieniemy came in and did a great job at offensive coordinator and play caller. I wouldn't be surprised if he was promoted to head coach, but overall, this team was bad, had a bad defense, had an offense that gave up a lot of turnovers, but overall, I'm just happy that Dan Snyder is no longer the owner of this team. I really don't know why I had the Giants in the playoffs. I mean, they were bound for regression, a much harder strength of schedule, as well as not really gaining anything in the offseason. Daniel Jones might have tore his ACL, but they were way better without him. I wouldn't blame Dable for their lack of success, but I don't know how this team is going to get out of their hole without drafting a quarterback, because Saquon will probably leave after this offseason. Honestly, the Eagles were not a very good team this year, regardless of their record. They really played more like an 8-9 team than an 11-6 team. At one point, they were 10-1, but it really didn't feel that way. They were winning a ton of close games. Both their offense and defense took heavy steps back because they lost both coordinators. I expect this team to lose a bunch of people in free agency, and I think they have a really good chance to lose the Buccaneers in the wild card. In all honesty, the Cowboys were the best NFC East team. They're arguably the 2nd or 3rd best NFC team. My biggest concern in the offseason was their goal line wasn't going to be as efficient, and they didn't have a wide receiver 3, which I think were both valid. Losing Zeke kind of hurt them in the goal line. They didn't have that consistent guy. But Dak Prescott had an MVP type year. CeeDee Lamb had an all-pro wide receiver year. Their defense is top 5, and their offense was really good as well. Good on them on winning the NFC East. I wasn't able to predict the division winner, and I was off by 8 total games, but my standings and records were somewhat close, but I was still way too high on the Giants this year. I have all the praise for the Lions as they won the first NFC North since 1993. Dan Campbell finally instilled a 10-win culture to the Lions. The offense as a whole played incredible, supported by 2 great rookies in Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs. And on the defense, Aiden Hutchinson had his breakout year with 100 pressures per PFF. Shout out to the offensive line as well. But yeah, super happy for the Lions, and I was also dead on in the prediction as well, only missing by 1 game. I didn't think the Packers were going to do as well as they actually did, even making the playoffs. I thought Jordan Love was going to have more of a production curve where he blew up in the second half. That's kind of what he did, but he didn't have one game where he didn't throw a touchdown pass. He had 30 plus touchdowns. The wide receiver core, even with very young, did well, but the defense as a whole was a really rough spot for them. Big ups on Jordan Love though. He'll probably get that long-term contract next offseason. This is the third year in a row I've correctly guessed the Chicago Bears' record. I said in my prediction that they would struggle in the beginning and the middle of the year, but would catch fire late in the season. And that's kind of what they did when Justin Fields came back from injury. They won a couple of games. The biggest thing for their season was their defense got a lot better, especially after trading for Montez Sweat. However, their offense with Justin Fields was still kind of inefficient, not that great through the air. DJ Moore was a great addition in that trade package, as well as having the #1 overall pick this year. And I held out for long enough, but I do think the Chicago Bears are going with quarterback in the offseason. But hopefully they fire Luke Getsy and get a real offensive coordinator. In the offseason, I didn't really think this was a surprise. I really thought the Vikings were due for a regression. In 2022, they were 11-0 in one-score games. However, in 2023, that number came down heavily. But they were plagued by injuries, especially with the quarterback carousel and losing Justin Jefferson. However, the defense got a lot better with Brian Flores at DC, but I think their #1 move for this offseason is going to be quarterback. The NFC North was my best division, only off by 5 total games. I had the Bears record correct, with the Vikings and the Lions only being off by 1 game, except the Packers doing a lot better than I expected. Overall, solid list here, 3 in the green. The Cardinals actually subverted my expectations a lot, even though I was only 1 game off from their record. The thing about the Cardinals is they played very competitively against good teams, and a lot of their losses were by 1 score only. For a team with the second worst defense in the NFL, and that didn't have their starting quarterback for the first 8 games, they overall played much better than expected. Even guys like James Conner had a great year. I think Jonathan Gannon's probably bought another 1 or 2 years, and Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing did a phenomenal job with a limited roster. And with the 4th overall pick, I think they're in the Marvin Harrison Jr. sweepstakes. 49ers did exactly what I thought as well. Even though I didn't expect Brock Purdy to be the day 1 starter, he came in and looked like an MVP candidate. Now, many people say he got carried by his elite roster, and that's also true. The 49ers have the best group of skill position players in the NFL, as well as the best play caller and the best left tackle in the league. But the 49ers offense never looked like this with Jimmy Garoppolo. As well as the defense still being strong, the 49ers finished as the 1 seed this year, and looked like the best team to go to the Super Bowl this year in the NFC. I was a bit overzealous in my prediction for the Seattle Seahawks. I thought key offseason additions like Jackson Smith-Njigba and Devin Witherspoon would have put this team over the top. They did lose a few games that they shouldn't have lost, and Geno Smith faced a bit of regression. He wasn't as ballsy with his throws, and it wasn't as accurate. But overall, the Seahawks played pretty much how they did last season, except with a little bit less offensive dominance. But with 2 games off and they didn't make the playoffs, I was wrong in this prediction. A lot of people, including myself, were low on the Rams this offseason. They only had 3 wins in 2022, and I didn't know how Matthew Stafford and Christian Kupp would come back from major injury. But rookies like Puka Nacua, who had the greatest wide receiver rookie year of all time, broke the receptions record, broke the yards record, and rookie defenders like Byron Young and even Kobe Turner, who had 10 sacks. The offense returned back to its Super Bowl form. Aaron Donald was once again a Pro Bowler, and Sean McVay is never to be doubted. If they beat the Lions in the wild card, they're going to be one of my favorites to reach the NFC Championship game. I was mostly accurate with the NFC West outside of the Rams being 5 games off, but with the 49ers, I got the exact record and only 1 off from the Cardinals. With only 8 games off, I think the NFC West was mostly a success. I honestly thought I was really accurate with this prediction, even though the record was 9-8. The Saints were a humongous up and down team. Either they were getting blown out and Derek Carr was having a bad game, or they were blowing out a team with Derek Carr having 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's just the type of quarterback he is. But overall, the Saints had a top 10 defense with a really good secondary, and their offense was really touted by their great receiving core. But in a really weird NFC South and with the second easiest strength of schedule, they were able to finish 9-8. The Buccaneers were truly the most deserving NFC South team to make the playoffs. They had the best offense supported by Baker Mayfield with his best year as a pro. Rashad White had his breakout year, as well as Mike Evans continuing the 1,000-yard streak and becoming a Pro Bowler. Even though the defense slipped a little bit at the end of the season, they were still 9-8. And mind the green on the record, that's supposed to be red because I was off by 5 games. I did not think the Buccaneers were going to be as good, and I thought the quarterback position for the Buccaneers was going to be a massive issue. But I was wrong. I'll take my L. I really thought the Falcons had a lot of potential. I thought that they could use their dual running back system with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. along with their good run blocking offensive line, to have probably the best rushing attack in the NFL, as well as, I don't know, maybe Kyle Pitts, Drake London on the offense. Thank God that war criminal Arthur Smith is finally gone. Thankfully, that nepotism baby, by the way, son of a billionaire, can finally leave the NFL and never get a job again. Glad his ego got crushed against the Saints. But hopefully Ben Johnson takes over this system. I would love it if they finally were able to use Bijan Robinson. Oh, you know, and Kyle Pitts in the passing game. Saving the worst for last, I thought the Panthers were going to be a little bit better than they were. You know, Bryce Young first overall pick, Frank Reich, pretty good offensive play caller, but almost the complete opposite happened. The Panthers were probably the second worst offense in the NFL next to the Jets. And Bryce Young behind the worst offensive line was just slaughtered out there. He's not helped by his size at all. He's the smallest quarterback in the NFL. With a terrible running game, a horrible wide receiver core, and a bad defense, the Panthers were undoubtedly the worst team in the NFL, and they don't have the first overall pick to even show for it. The NFC South was my worst division, but it was bound to be that way. The NFC South was probably the most controversial division in the offseason. Literally nobody knew who was going to win, obviously including me. Looking over the NFC, I did a bit better than the AFC, getting 2 out of 4 division winners and 4 out of 7 playoffs, but not any drastically better. But I was really disappointed in my predictions this year. I would only say I had one division even close to being correct with the NFC North. In 2022, I was 74% accurate and I took a 3% drop, as well as being 10 games off from 3 out of 4 AFC divisions. My NFC was a bit better, but it was really plagued by the NFC South. I had 3 exactly correct predictions with the Bears, the Bills, and the 49ers, but my worst 4 predictions were the Panthers, Jets, Browns, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But even though I am disappointed in my accuracy, I did learn a few things from this year. The thing that I learned is I should take more risks. Teams like the Texans that I thought would improve a lot definitely did. And teams that I thought were going to regress like the Chargers and the Vikings did. And in my predictions, I don't account for injuries, and I don't account for coaching firings, which does heavily impact records. But hopefully next year, I can look to vastly improve these numbers. But that's going to do it for the end of the regular season. And that's also going to do it for this video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what teams you thought in the preseason were going to do really good. And I can't wait to hear how you guys pick apart my predictions in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next one.